Psychedelics, drugs, or potential tools to explore the mind. What motivates the researchers in this field? Psychedelics, why and how? Sasha Shulgin, some call him the father of MDMA, but in fact he is one of the leading researchers in entheogens, in chemicals that change our mood, our brain. Now, what I'm interested in, Sasha, is the roots of this all. I mean, you started working this as a scientist in a laboratory with modern means, but doesn't all this searching for the alternative goes back many, many, many centuries?
Well, you have to realize what I'm searching for, which is not for altering consciousness or for having fun or for enjoying this or for discovering that. I'm looking for tools that can be used for studying the mind. And other people then will use the tools in finding out the aspects of the mental process and how it ties to the brain. But my main drive is as a tool maker, making of tools, and letting other people exploit them.
But that means you have a fascination with how the mind, how the brain works.
Completely fascinated, but not the brain, the mind. The brain is now, we're in the decade of the brain. Everyone looking at neurotransmitters here and serotonin and dopamine and all these sort of things, which is a marvelous search. And indeed, they're uncovering many peculiarities of neurological connections, but many are being found in animals. And in fact, the animal is the main location for research. And I'm interested in things that affect the mental process, the function of the mind, which is not necessarily to be found in an animal. So the questions I am addressing are: how does one affect the attitude towards something, the self-image of something, the feeling of religious ecstasy or of fear and paranoia, something you can't see in a rat.
Is that true? Do you think that that's the difference between human beings and animals? That
I cannot conceive of how a rat would have a good self-image or a bad self-image. I might see how he behaves to a stimulus, or how he might retreat from an attack, or how he might be lured by some pheromone into some relationship. But a self-image, the knowledge that he is mortal and he must achieve something or other before his death, the sense that he has an ominous apprehension of something that might occur in the future, the memory of an early life experience, earlier incarnation, reincarnation. These are interesting aspects of the human mind, but they're not, that, to my knowledge, a part of the rat's mind.
Long time ago there was Saint Francis in Italy, and I like that he went out and preached to the animals and the birds. So there must be something.
Well, maybe he enjoyed that form of interaction. Did the birds respond well? I don't remember.
There is no order of the birds yet.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
But there is a St. Francis.
There is a St. Francis, and then he changed things. San Francisco, for one thing. Can you, when you go back to when you were young, what was there something that made you go for the mind?
Yes, it was an extraordinary experience with mescaline. Oh gosh, about 40 years ago. I was given in an experimental setting 350 milligrams of mescaline sulfate, and I knew intellectually what it was and what it did, but I did not know personally what it was and what it did. There were about 10 of us together, and about half of us were experimental subjects, and half of the people were babysitters. And I went in it with rather an open view of what was going to happen, and I was totally dumbfounded by what occurred. I suddenly found myself into an extraordinary world, physical world around me, visual, sensory world of color, of interpretation, of motion, of form, of shape. And my first response was to say, how did this drug do this? How did 350 milligrams of a white solid produce this effect? And then I realized the drug had almost nothing to do with it. That drug allowed me to realize, express, to appreciate what was there all along. And I was totally blind to it. So what it did, it catalyzed the opening of my own viewing, and that caught my fancy. And from that point on, I've been in research in this world ever since.
Yeah, but go further back, because the fact that you were even willing to do an experiment like that must have had earlier roots. I mean, how was your parents? Were they obsessed with the mind? Was there a school that said, "Hey, this is"?
No, I think probably immediately prior to this experiment, I had been exploring psycho-this, that changes. I had been reading everything I could upon things that were sedatives, that were narcotics, everything from vasodilators of yohimbine, which might be aphrodisiacs, to the psychedelic drugs. And the word psychedelic did not exist, but the drugs that might be involved in changing the point of view or attitude of people, things that might be in with some religious context. I was intellectually preparing myself for this event. Why was I interested at all? That would go back yet younger, when I was in my pre-adolescence, in which I found myself in a very interesting interaction with some kind of an alter me, an alter ego. I had very few, in fact, I had virtually no good friends. The few I had were either aggressive or destructive. And so I was more or less a loner. And I got deeply involved in music. I found that good retreat in that. But being in music alienated me with yet other people who were in the physical world and sports and what have you. And so I more or less pursued my own relationships with my own unconscious. And I did not realize at that time that that was a potential ally, and I saw it as a not a particularly friendly component.
Could you, if you say that, could it be that you were searching for the dark depths of your mind, because the fact that other people didn't like you were a little bit of a loner, that made you doubt yourself, and that these substances and this research gave you an opportunity to look deeper into yourself?
Well, I did not know at that time that there was any research or any world like this out there. I had to live totally within myself. I remember the pleasures I had in being underneath a fence that was behind the house. I lived in Berkeley at that time in California, and the fence was a honeysuckle fence, and on it were these marvelous little blossoms that you could bite the end off and have a very sweet drop of fluid. And I found that was an ally in the sense that here was something that made me feel at home, and yet my neighbor and my parents owned the fence, but the path underneath it went on both sides, and I could, in essence, straddle across both worlds and use the...
You still do that,
I still do that, yeah. But I use the honeysuckle as sort of a personal palliative retreat. And it was a personal friend of mine, and I established a good relationship with that plant, and maybe that was the beginning of a relationship with plant and plant materials. Just the sweetness and the absolute trustworthiness of honeysuckle.
But so your motivations might not have been to seek the Godhead at first. You were just curious. You wanted to know why you were different and how that worked.
I don't think I'm interested in the Godhead now. I don't quite know what it is. I'm interested now in what works upstairs and why it works. Sometimes you have to disrupt something to see how it should work. Sometimes you'll come across something that is disrupted, and these may be tools to reconstruct what has been disrupted for pathological or traumatic reasons. I don't know. But you can go into the direction of trying to repair, help, be a therapist, interact with others. This is noble. This is a whole profession unto itself, not mine. What I know, in time there will be a going with tools, with therapeutic tools, to the helping of others, and my art's making those tools, and I want to use my energy that way.
Now, some people will say that the tools you made, 2CB, and you brought to the surface MDMA and many other substances, backfired. It has been used for the wrong reasons. So they see you as a bad guy because you didn't help the world. You put it into more misery.
In what I had no voice in how these things are used. My point is putting them in the medical literature, the scientific literature, and let people use it. Good heavens, people publish how to make gunpowder and isolate uranium isotopes. That makes it no less of a search how these things are, what they will do, how to obtain them for whatever use you wish to put them to. Education can be put to a terrible misuse. I've seen it done that way. Someone asked me, well, aren't there irreversible changes from drug use? There are irreversible changes from an advanced degree in the university. You're never the same person. But you've been equipped with something. How you use it, then you sort of strike a bargain with your own alter ego and perhaps your own unconscious. But to have that information allows you to use it. Not to have it robs you of that possibility. And I struck tools exactly at that point. They're there, they do this, they modify that, they change the viewing towards something. Search it out. Let other people use the tools, and they are far better equipped than I am to use them. I have no experience, nor do I particularly want to use it that way. But I want to make the tools because I can do.
Yeah, but you personally, have you felt that it worked, that these things helped at least yourself and the people that you knew good enough to get another view on the reality, to see themselves in a...
They've helped me very much. My wife very much has a good viewing of what she calls the shadow, the aspect of a person who is confronted, will not confront, but has there to confront an inner something, a beast, a shadow, a something of the person, in the Jungian sense, the unconscious of that, not the subconscious, but way down there, the beast in the belly. And that is very often looked upon by people as an absolutely frightening enemy. And hence it is suppressed, it's turned away. Maybe we can turn to do this, or escape, we'll go and work at a living over there, or we'll drink too much over there, or maybe we'll marry as we shouldn't marry but have children.
Escape it.
Escape, absolutely. Rather than confront that. And to confront that is frightening, and to some people can be very destructive. Take a person who knows that beast is there.
Mm-hmm. But for you, was it destructive for you?
It was the most marvelous thing that could happen, because I found it's a damn ally. I could use it or not use it as I chose, and we in essence shook hands.
And was that an extra drive for you to go further in the world and look for other things because you think it worked for you?
This is a use of a tool that worked for me, but it's not the type of tool I'm trying to develop. I'm trying to develop tools that interfere with the more subtle aspects of the intellect, because there are many cases where this could be a therapeutic or a constructive or a beneficial approach in areas of mental illness, in areas of incomplete cognitive control, in areas of tumor or traumatic damage, to find alternate routes to integrity.
Well, there's two models there. One is of the disorder model, and the other is the augmentation model. The disorder augmentation. The disorder model is someone is sick, has a problem, has a psychological, even a bodily function that doesn't work, and with your inventions, substances, that might help, bringing back to the baseline. The other thing is to help people to become smarter. We can talk about smart drugs or substances that might give them an advantage in the world. Now take people that take a SAT test. I think you call it in America, all these tests. If he takes certain drugs, he might be able to make a better result. Is that true?
It may well be, but that is not of any interest to me. Either the repairing of what is deficient or the augmentation of what is adequate are interesting uses of these, but this is not of interest to me. If something is inadequate, repair might come from a number of the sources. I don't think necessarily the understanding of the mechanism of the mental process will lead to automatic repair of damage or augmentation of adequacy. It will allow a tool to be used to explore why it is deficient or explore how it might be augmented. I don't really believe augmentation is that difficult a task. I think that we're running at a full 3% of our capability right now. And I think with just a little bit of self-discipline or perhaps a little bit of faith in oneself, you could go from 3 to 4%. That's a big increase, and it doesn't take a drug at all.
No, you can eat better food or go take better holidays. Work it. There's many ways, but still, there's the feeling that these things we can do to ourselves have an ethical side. If people who are rich can use them and others cannot, what would happen to those who stay behind?
How is a rich person can use something that a poor person can't? I don't understand.
Well, suppose that there are drugs available or medications or substances that help you to become smarter.
All right, say there are. Is this in the interest of the people who control the availability of drugs, to have people become smarter? Is this really the power structure within our government to have people become more informed voters? Is it in the interest of politicians to have people more intelligent? Oh, really? I don't think that that's quite real. I think it's the interest of those in power to maintain that power. And one way that power is maintained is to restrict and deny and eventually eliminate drugs that would constitute competition.
Yeah, but then there's always revolutionaries like you, alchemists, who go seek nature, seek science, seek a way first to help themselves, to do the internal alchemical work, but then it goes out in the world, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. True, but I don't believe, other than the satisfaction of getting this information into the public, that I'm a power seeker. Because I find that is a trap. I've seen it in other people, a trap that allows people to actually begin compromising their own principles very cleanly and very neatly for the sake of accruing power, wealth. It's the same thing. I think that the satisfaction is what lives beyond you. And indeed, that's why we have children, that's why we have families, that's why we establish relationships, and that's why some people paint art, some people write poetry, and some people make chemicals. Mm-hmm. It's a way of leaving something that is lasting and may be of value. Otherwise, with your death, you are a flame that's gone out, nothing else.
Last night I dreamed, and there was this word, the being of time, which you can interpret in many ways. The being of time, We happen to be in Mexico at the moment. The Maya people who lived around here were obsessed by things like death and time. Were they also obsessed with the substances we're talking about?
They have survived in many ways. One of my favorite questions I get asked when I come back from the southern part of Mexico is, where have the Mayans gone? And the question is, you answer it, you just go there and look, and they're all about you. They have indeed survived. They have survived most eloquently. I don't know where the Spaniards went, but the Mayans are still here. So in that level, they have achieved at least for the moment, immortality. Have they used materials such as this? Of course they have, because they are all the time searching into themselves for exactly the answer to these things. These are the tools that I have used in some ways as guides as how to design new materials for research. But rather,
you went to look what, say, the botanical stuff was out here, and used it to see what chemicals were active in there.
Completely. Here is a plant. This plant can be used for this purpose. The plant can be used for healing. The whole process of healing is a beautiful example. Here you have drugs, chemicals that are healing chemicals. They are in plants. The ancient knowledge, wisdom of what the plants are is indeed carried from generation to generation, but a little touch. Sometimes the healing plants are used to treat illness, not in the patient, but in the physician. The physician will take the drug, will take the healing thing to be able to interpret what is wrong with the patient and be able to help the patient. A different view that comes only with the awareness that healing is a process, if you are a healer, of interaction. And
but that's so funny, because you have studied the chemical interaction, which is very defined. We talk about molecules and their active parts and what you call the dirty pictures of the chemist. And now you say, yes, but there is another thing. There's the interaction. That the doctor can be the helper, but also he can be the one who takes the burden, because that's what they do.
Leap ahead to the purpose I'm after, where you develop tools that can be used in studying the human mind. The person, that will require human interaction too. And that whether the tool is used in a radioactive sample to go into the brain and go into a positron emission tomography picture to see where it goes, doesn't tell you how the mind works. It tells you where the chemical goes in the mind. To understand how the mind works may take the interaction with the subject, the volunteer. It may be the researcher. It may be both, but it may be an exchange of understanding in which these chemicals merely open up doors, catalyze vehicles of expression that would not otherwise be there. These are not going to be doing things. They're going to be allowing things. Just as the plant to the medicine man in the jungle is allowed to see the definition of the illness, this is a way in which a researcher or a person who is a companion in a question is allowed to see the approach to mental process. It doesn't do things, it allows things. And that is the heart of this whole area of research.
Your next book is... We have a book called Pikal, and now there's going to be a book called Tikal, which is about a different class of chemical.
It's the area of these mental catalytic, so-called psychedelic or psychoactive materials. Pikal is for phenethylamines, which is about half of the psychedelic scene. The other book is about tryptamines, which is in essence the other side of the coin. Is the rest of the picture. The two members of these two classes probably constitute about 95% of all psychoactive drugs.
Now, in the first book, there was a very personal account of your coming to terms with these things. It was more of an adventure on how you invented these things, or found them. Is Tikal going to have that personal aspect too?
It'll have personal aspect of, but both Anne and I have covered this question already of how we got started, how we are at peace with this, and how we have formed our own relationship. Now, what have we done with it? Where have we been going with it, and where might we go with it? So that aspect will be kind of a fictionalized autobiography as well. And then the second half of the book, again, will be, as in the first book, descriptions of the drugs involved.
For the people that really want to know, what I think people really want to know, are you happy? Because what's your age now?
71.
You fly around the world, speak at all kinds of conferences, do work. You're still in the laboratory. You've had some problems with the law there they didn't allow you to do some research, but you're still very active. Mm-hmm. All this work has done you good?
I could not be happier.
Thank you, Sasha.
There are chemicals that are pheromones to insects, which come from plants. That the pheromone, for example, if it comes from a plant that blooms too early in the day, is the wrong optical isomer, it will turn away the mating path of the other insect. But the insect will then come at the right time of day to pick up the pollen at the right time to take the other. Chemistry, weird pheromones,
nature, I mean.
Weird this, and without one, you don't have the other.
This interview took place in Palenque, in the Mexican state of Chiapas, and a place where magic mushrooms can be found in the fields. But the same goes for many places in Mexico, and in the old days there was probably a cult around magic mushrooms or other psychedelic substances. Sasha Shulgin is probably the most renowned expert in the world on synthetic drugs. Chemical compounds that have effects that resemble those of the magic mushrooms or other substances from the past, like the ergot, or some substances that people think that the Aztecs used in their time a few thousand years ago. Sasha Shulgin researched most into psychedelic drugs. He was interested in tryptamines, amphetamines, and has written 2 books. One of them is called Tikal, the people who are interested in phenylamphetamines, and his latest book is called Tikal, and it's about tryptamines. Tryptamines like DMT, one of the substances in magic mushrooms, or psilocybin. But DMT comes back in many substances from the jungle, like the ayahuasca from South America. Alexander Shulgin and his wife have done chemical research, but also therapy, group therapy, individual sessions with many people based on the substances that they have found. And as Alexander Shulgin has said, he has used all the compounds that he found, invented, made. A truly remarkable man who can be seen as the father of ecstasy, although that's the one chemical compound he hasn't actually synthesized first. But he made many others, like 2CB, PCP, and many of these so-called designer drugs, synthetic drugs, as they're known. The drugs of the disco scene, although that is certainly not what Alexander Shulgin intended. He made those drugs, he researched into strange substances, strange combinations, strange compounds, in order to know more about the mind.
Money states. It is a political interesting point of view in Mexico, as almost all the marijuana is raised by the army. And that is their direct feedback. That's what they get there.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, why do you think that what the Peron is doing now in San Francisco, is he going to succeed, or will they find a way to curb the whole thing?
I think eventually they'll find a way to stop it. because it is not in national interest. It's not in the interest of the economy and the war. I have one chapter in the book called "Cui Bono," to whose benefit is this war on drugs? And in there, I address in that country, in the United States, what is the size of the industry that is the war on drugs? Not how much money is involved.
I mean, both the criminal side and the police and
as an industry, how big is that industry?
Prisons and the fastest growing. It's an enormous business.
It's probably between $300 and $500 billion.
So there's no reason to stop it.
Who benefits? These are what the State Department can no longer enter Spain with a little muscle and do this and do that. No.
Yeah, Dennis Peron said that the effect of his work would be that the price of marijuana would go down, and I thought, Jesus, that is maybe not the wisest thing to say, because, que bono, who has an interest in lowering the prices of marijuana? There's such a...
I mean, Dixie cups make cups routinely to sell for urine tests. A Hewlett-Packard is back-ordered on GCMSs at $50,000 a piece, providing these instruments for people who want to confirm urine tests of people who want to work for the gas company but can't work for the gas company unless they pee in a cup every 3 weeks. This is a big business. Who benefits by wiping out the Constitution, which has been about 30% stripped of its meaning because of the war on drugs? It used to be you were secure in your house. You may now be entered by a policeman who's acting in good faith, and I have yet to see a policeman who doesn't act in good faith, without a warrant. If in good faith he thinks there may be a drug crime committed.
And you have salt on your kitchen table, that is part of...
If in good faith he believes there is some crime associated with your car, he may take your car without even arresting or bringing a charge. Your car's gone. And he keeps it without accounting. There's no auditing.
Now there was the feeling that, a nation always needs a war. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now we had a war on drugs, and there was the hope that there would be, or the hope, there was the idea that there would be a thing called the war on cyberspace. Yeah, the electronic frontier, the electronic hypeway, I think Max Moore called it. Now they're finding out it doesn't work. People don't want this new expansion. Would that revert to the war on drugs? Would they go back? Would the government, instead of spending money now on the electronic highway, go back to fighting drugs?
They've never left fighting drugs. That's not
well.
bad.
People say that under Clinton there was a little bit of a less of a thing.
Oh, I missed it.
Yes, you think it went on as
this
strong as before?
This is the only election I know of in which a Republican ran against a Republican. No, tell me, Clinton to win as the things. He says every teenager, we're going to have this McCafferty figure a way we can get this into law and so forth. Every teenager who applies for a driving license shall take a drug test. My question is, and if you fail, you can deny him the license? But 3 out of every 100 tests are false positives. Are you going to deny 3 out of every 100 teenagers a driver's license because your tests are mediocre? What are you going to do with the people who fail? Tell them to come back in 6 months? They never answer these questions. Everybody, of course, you realize that morphine has now been shown to be a natural component of the brain, beside bagels giving you opium poppies things. You drive down on a bus in the back of a bus going from here over to Villahermosa, and that pot smoking back makes you positive urine, marijuana for the next 3 days. That's not of your doing, but you're positive. And 3 out of every 100 are false anyway. You're condemning.
Why are making people this nearly fascist, frightening society? It's not good for our health.
No, it's not good for our health. It's not good for the Constitution because it is a control. Why do people form police states? I lost the thread. Why were the national movements in Germany in the late 30s what they were, to cleanse and make the society clean and homogeneous and lead to the Fourth Reich and the better state? Why? Because jolly people got their jollies out of it. They were in power and they could run it. And say we have exactly the same thing in the United States. We have whole bodies of elite who are really doing a lot of controlling. They're not elected and they're not even known publicly. You have the General Service Administration. You have hosts of advisors into the military and in the executive who are not publicly known figures.
Why is it that the pollution that is outside in the world and that we know has also really invaded our political system then?
When was it free of it?
the pollution.
I know, but we were never free of it. We've always had a form of pollution in the real
world and in the virtual world. Yeah.
That is the way of politics, the way of the warriors, in the other sense.
Not a nice way. Thank you, Sasha. And who knows what you will find in the future. Because Sasha Shulgin is by no way finished with his research. His research in what a free mind can find. And we hope you enjoy the beautiful garden of our jungle hotel near Palenque ruins.